Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Hey. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. This is our first Women in Product event for January here in Silicon Valley. So we're very delighted that you all are able to come tonight. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. So we really appreciate it. We really wanted to say thank you to our host, Clover Health, for sponsoring this event. So thank you, Louisa and team. Really appreciate it. My name is Manish Schweigert. I'm the program director for Women in Product. And we're just a new nonprofit organization. We're a 501(c)(3), and we started about 18 and a half months ago with just 10 product leaders that wanted to have an opportunity for us to get together and connect and really network, share ideas and best practices, and really help elevate one another to a new opportunity. So that's how our community started. From there, we have grew to about 7,000 plus members in our closed Facebook group right now. And we have about 7,500 members in our newsletter subscribing community. So we're just so happy that, this is a space where women can come together and really, be able to help one another and share and give advice and so forth. So I just want to go over a few things here for tonight. We're a little behind, but that's okay. I'm going to do a little more introduction about our community and how you can get involved. And then Louisa's going to come out and talk about our Clover Health and the cool things that they're working on right now, and especially their hiring. So I hope you guys are ready to talk to some of the recruiters afterwards. And then we'll introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Ha-Wen. She's going to be talking about passion and purpose. And then afterwards, we'll have our panel up on stage, and you'll get to hear some fabulous ladies who've been working some really cool healthcare products. At the end, we'll do Q&A through Slido.com. I'll let you know in a little bit how to join in to send your questions. And then we'll have plenty of time to network at the end. And if you wouldn't mind, just help our hosts out at the end. Just kind of pick up your trash and dispose it properly. That would really help with the cleaning up process. So this is our team. These are the 10 product leaders that I get the privilege to be working with every day. They come from various different corporate environments, and they're very passionate about building this community. And so even though, a lot of these ladies have high, really demanding jobs during the day, in the evening, we are still able to connect in the evening to plan out events such as the one that you're here tonight. And also, which everything that we do throughout the months leads up to our end of the year conference. And hopefully you will mark your calendar for October 2018 conference this year. We will have the date finalized hopefully by the end of this week or so. We'll have that information available on our webpage. So do check that out at womenpm.org. So again, our mission is really to grow and empower women product managers and to really build products at scale. And with this community, there's just so many different product leaders from all over different technology tracks. And actually, our community has grown all around the world. For example, this year, I launched two new cities with cities in Seattle and New York. And our community there is just growing and driving and doing really, really well and coming together and connecting and networking. Tomorrow night is going to be our first event in Chicago. So I hope that you all tune in. It's going to be live streaming from Braintree tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So support our community in Chicago by joining in through live streaming. And that's going to be available through our Wipp Facebook page as well. In addition to that, we did about 30 events this past year, and we are really gearing up to a really full calendar of events this coming year. So I hope that you would take up every opportunity to come in and really network and share the experience with us. If you haven't already joined our Wipp community, I would encourage you and invite you to go to our womenpm.org. There's a button up in the upper right-hand corner to join. When you do join, you'll get access to our Wipp closed Facebook group, as well as our new newsletter and Twitter feed as well too. We love it that our women in product really come together and really help advocate for one another. So if you find that your community does not have a PM community, you can always start one, right? Go talk to your leaders and see how you can grow your women in product within your company. So be an advocate. I would ask that you would do that. And then in addition to that, you can help by planning and hosting a Wipp event, just like here at Clover Health. So another way you can get involved is if you know good speakers, you can also recommend speakers as well too for our monthly Wipp events as well as our conferences. Or last year, for example, we launched mentoring circles. We launched about 500 circles throughout the United States. And this year, we really expand that community to around the world where our women in product communities are at. So if you're interested in that, on our website, there's a form you can fill out either to be a mentor or mentee, and then really get involved. From the corporate sponsor side, if you're here and you have a space within your company and you really want to host women in product community, you can certainly do that. You can email me at womenpm@gmail.com or info@womenpm.org, and I will be sure to get back to you on that. Again, as you know, as sponsors, you can provide speakers, host an event. Like I said earlier, we are expanding to several new cities: Chicago, Austin, Boston, Raleigh, Amsterdam, Tel Aviv, London, and Toronto. So if you are, if you have friends in those communities that haven't heard about women in product, reach out to them, introduce them. In our closed Facebook group, we actually have a subgroup for each of those communities. So feel free to invite them to join. And then in addition to that, one of the cool things that we're able to offer our corporate sponsor is the job newsletters. So if you're hiring, we would love to have you hire from our Wipp community. You can submit your jobs to our newsletter, which goes out every Saturday. And we also have a job board on our website as well, too, that we keep the job opportunity up until you let us know that it's filled, and we'll take that down. In addition, we also launched the Wipp Jobs subgroup in our closed Facebook group community. So that's a great way for hiring managers to just go ahead and post jobs there as well too. If you have any questions regarding that, please just let us know. And we have a lot of our women in product volunteers here up front. There's Haley, Katie, Angela here, Hagit, and Debbie here. So if you have any questions, just seek those ladies out and they'll be more than happy to help you. We have partnered with SwapCard. And as you were registering for this event, you might have gotten an email from SwapCard, our sponsor, to download the app. It's a way for us to try to encourage you to stay connected and stay engaged. Before you're going to an event, you want to see who's going to that event, or at the event, you want to find out who's there. And if you're hiring, from the hiring community, it's a great way because people are already gathering there. If you want to come and meet with them and do, informal interview or whatnot, it's available to you. In addition to that, you get chances to track one another or linked with each other on LinkedIn. And then, see where your community is growing together. It's a great way to stay connected, especially tonight if you're collecting, business card, you can always scan that in and it will keep track of all that information for you. So check it out. So basically all you have to do is download that, log in with your LinkedIn account, and then you will have access to all the Wipp events that we have going on this year. Okay, so later on this year, we're working on the Wipp Mentoring App. It's going to be powered by Vaxa, and this is going to be launched on our event February 15th at Walmart Labs. And so I hope that you'll get a chance to come. That's going to be a really nice conference as well, too. And we'll have more information about that. So before we get started here, I want you to go ahead and log into slido.com. If you put in the code #WomenPM, this will give you a chance to submit your questions, to ask the panel, or to ask our keynote speaker, Ha, here. And then we'll be able to answer your questions towards the end during the Q&A session. Okay. All right, without further ado, I'd like to invite up Louisa Henry. She is the director here at Clover Health, and she'll give a few words about Clover Health.
Great, thanks, Vinny. So as she mentioned, I am the director of product here at Clover. I've been here about 3 years. I'll just give you a little background on Clover. Won't spoil too much because we have a couple PMs who are going to be joining, and we'll get into the real meat of what we're working on. But Clover Health is a Medicare insurance company, so we provide insurance. We're not kind of like a middleman or anything. Specifically for the Medicare population, so 65 and older and disabled. And we have markets right now in New Jersey, Philly, Savannah, San Antonio. And here at Clover, as a product person, we are building a lot of tools internally right now to help support our insurance operations, but also to move us forward in our mission, which is to use the data that we have to create insights, to define pattern recognition, to start to use machine learning, and really understand the whole picture of the member and intervene before there's like an episodic event that might send them to the hospital. So what we're really trying to do is improve outcomes and lower the cost of health insurance by lowering some of those more costly interventions. So with that, and we're hiring. We are definitely hiring senior PMs. We have Gabrielle and Marie in the back. Raise your hand. They're our recruiting team. And then we have, yay. And then we have quite a few folks from Clover. If you're from Clover, can you raise your hand? Cool. So feel free to talk to them if you want to learn more about the company. And with that, I'll introduce it to Ha. So Ha is a product partner at Omidyar. We're focused on emerging tech.
Thank you, Louisa. So while I switch the computer, there's plenty of seats in the front row here. Love to have a front row audience, so feel free to come up. And then is there a clicker? Or should I just manually? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Well, hi, everyone. So today I'd like to share with you the story of one of my favorite entrepreneurs, and that's Tomas Ravi. So Tomas grew up in Brazil, and he had a decade-long successful career as a hedge fund manager and an investment banker. But after a period of time, Tomas was feeling empty and unfulfilled. So he asked himself the question, is this what I should be doing with my life? Not knowing the answer to that question, Tomas did what I think many of us would do in this situation. He went to graduate school. So towards the end of his time at graduate school, Tomas had no greater clarity on what he wanted to do with his life. One day, he was sitting in a school cafeteria. He looked up and he saw this quote by Sarah Bernhardt. And the quote was, "Life begets life. Energy creates energy. It is by spending oneself that one becomes rich." So this quote had a powerful impact on Tomas. And in the days and the weeks that followed, Tomas kept coming back to the same question: how should he be spending himself? Eventually, the answer became clear. Tomas wanted to tackle the healthcare crisis in Brazil. So a little bit about the healthcare crisis. In Brazil, 100 million people are medically homeless. And that means that they're poor, they're uninsured, and they have to rely on the public healthcare system in order to receive care. But in reality, these patients wait on average 10 months before they can go see a doctor. And when they are able to see a doctor, 7 out of 10 of these patients rate the quality of care as either poor or extremely poor. So Tomas started a company called Dr. Consulta. And today, Dr. Consulta runs over 50 tech-enabled healthcare clinics all across Sao Paulo, most of them located in favelas or slums. So since its inception, Dr. Consulta has surpassed even Tomas's wildest expectations. The best doctors and nurses from all across Brazil come to work for Dr. Consulta. Patients are able to see a Dr. Consulta doctor at a very affordable price, about $30 per visit. And they're able to see a doctor within 2 days of scheduling the appointment. So compare that again to the public healthcare system, 10 months versus 2 days. Think about that impact. And Dr. Consulta receives 98% patient satisfaction scores. Even more impressive, 100% of Dr. Consulta's healthcare clinics that have been operating for a year or more are profitable. And Dr. Consulta reinvest these profits back into machine learning and artificial intelligence to predict and improve patients' healthcare outcomes, and to expand healthcare all across Brazil to achieve impact at mass scale. So why and how has Dr. Consulta achieved such great success in such a short period of time? Well, the answer lies in this parable that I'm going to share with you. So imagine that you're walking alongside a construction-filled, really busy roadside, and you come across a group of men. They're each carrying sledgehammers, and you go up to the first one and you ask the man, "What are you doing?" And he answers, "I'm breaking rocks." Okay? So then you go up to the second man who's holding a sledgehammer and you ask him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm earning a living." You go up to the third man and you ask him, "What are you doing?" And this third man answers something entirely different. He says he's building a cathedral. So what sets Dr. Consulta apart is that they're a part of something greater. They're part of a higher purpose, just like the man who said he was building a cathedral. And when you work at Dr. Consulta, you feel this infusion of purpose, and you see it every day. And Dr. Consulta's purpose is to engage the medically homeless in Brazil by providing them not just with treatment, but to serve them and to delight them at a time when they most desperately need it. So when you have purpose on your side, everything changes. So just like Tomas's experience, how his employees feel, my own personal experience, and the vast amounts of research, when you have purpose on your side, this becomes a game changer. Purpose-driven companies are more likely to have more loyal and engaged employees, more satisfied and delighted customers, and are better businesses. So let's look at each one of these. First, starting with employees. So with purpose, Tomas has felt more fulfillment than he has ever had before. And his purpose-driven company attracts not just only the best doctors and nurses to come work for them, but they come to work every day inspired and energized by the bigger purpose that they're there to serve. And the data also supports that purpose-driven employees have 2 times higher job satisfaction, are 1.5 times more engaged at work, and these employees are 3 times more likely to stay within their organization. So in this crazy competitive world for talent, having purpose on your side allows you to stand out and becomes a secret weapon. So now that we've seen the impact that purpose has for employees, let's look at the impact that it has on customers. So a Harvard Business Review research report shows that 91% of consumers say that they would switch to a purpose-driven brand if it had the same price and quality as a non-purpose-driven brand. And then 71% of them would help to promote a brand's purpose and services if it was purpose-driven. And Dr. Consulta saw this as well. So not only were they able to achieve a record 98% patient satisfaction, but the biggest source of referrals of new patients are their existing patients. These patients are so delighted by the care that they get from Dr. Consulta that they tell their family and their friends to come to Dr. Consulta when they're sick and when they need it most. And so now that we've seen the impact that purpose has on both customers and employees, it should be no surprise that these companies also do better as businesses. In the book, Corporate Performance and Culture, HBS professors Cotter and Heskett show that over a decade-long period, purpose-driven, values-driven companies outperform their counterparts in stock price by a factor of 12. So just think about that for a moment. Regular company, $1 billion in market cap, but a purpose-driven company, $12 billion in market cap. So let's look at some examples of this. So I believe that some of the greatest companies of our generation not only have the greatest purposes, but also are able to achieve record profits and have the biggest market caps. So let's look at eBay, a company that I was proud to be part of way back when it was an early stage startup. eBay's mission was to empower people and create economic opportunity, and their market cap is $40 billion. StemCentrix, developing therapies that cure and improve the lives of cancer patients. Or Tesla, accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. Or Airbnb, making people around the world feel that they could belong anywhere. Similarly, the new generation of companies like Dr. Consulta also experience not just hypergrowth, but for Dr. Consulta, which is one of Omidria Network's portfolio organizations, they have consistently, quarter after quarter, exceeded their financial targets in both revenues and profits. So today, as I mentioned, I work for Omidria Network, and Omidria Network is a global investment firm that has given over $1 billion in capital to organizations that foster economic advancement and create opportunities for individuals. At Omidria Network, we invest in companies like Dr. Consulta that are looking to solve some of the world's most pressing problems of our times and are looking to build successful companies that inspire. Because we know that these companies are the ones who are going to attract the best minds, have the most passionate and loyal customers, are the ones who are going to be wildly successful as businesses, and are going to be the ones who positively impact the world. So when you have purpose, the impact is powerful, not just on you individually, but also on the lives of the people that you serve. So my hope for each of you is that you will join or be part of building a purpose-driven company, that you will tap and find your inner purpose, and that you will experience the benefits that being part of a purpose-driven company affords, and that you will also be part of building this cathedral. So thank you. Do we want to say questions for now or the end? The end?
Yeah, let's take
The end?
the end.
Okay.
We have our panelists come up, please. Come on up. Yeah. Oh, up there? No, just sit down and have a seat. We're going to have to share mics. All right. Hello, welcome. Thank you, Ha, for that wonderful, inspiring talk. That was really, it reminds me why I love to come to work every day and what we're building and how it's so meaningful. So I want to go ahead and get started here with the panel. Let's actually, could you make sure your mic is on? Can you flip that up? We're going to do some introductions. If we just go down, and maybe we'll start with you, Amy. Just talk about, what you're working on today, what brings you here, why you chose the company you're with, and yeah, we'll just take it from there.
Can anyone hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm so excited to see almost a full room of women. I think we need more men support, right? So next time, bring men into this room as well. Thank you so much for your talk. It makes me really feel meaningful for what I'm doing. I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor, and that completely changed my life. So I abandoned my corporate career, and I started a company called Dance for Healing. It's an AI-powered tele-exercise platform, empower patients like myself who stuck at home often, isolated and lonely, either due to cancer, chemo, or other type of chronic conditions, or aging. And we are a behavior change company. What's unique about us, we're using AI to track the most relevant data to cultivate healthy behavior change. And we also match patient to patients, caregiver to caregivers, and intergeneration matching. So it's kind of like eHarmony for patients. So we can help you not only do the change yourself, but also bring in the most relevant support as recommended by BJ Fogg's behavior model, famous Stanford professor. If you want to learn more, feel free to talk to me afterwards. It's incredibly powerful for designing products, especially for healthy behavior change.
Hi, everyone.
Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Jo. I am professionally a veterinarian, and I decided to take a very long journey to really find my purpose and passion, what is now called Verisim Life. I started this by really understanding what is really lacking in the healthcare really pretty early on during my veterinary days and in my practicing years, and then decided to do a PhD in comparative oncology with genomics and computer science as my major, to really figure out how can we computationally, which is the best time to be alive for those same reasons, determine quickly and efficiently and accurately the right kind of drugs that needs to be given to the patients, more specifically cancer patients. This is where I started Verisim Life. I am CEO and founder of this company. Our goal is to really create AI-enabled disease-specific biosimulation models in a manner that researchers at pharma can quickly determine, and on a software platform, what kind of drug or combinations of drug that may or may not work in an animal or human body on a virtual or computational platform versus the real life. And our ultimate goal is to create a very scalable and powerful platform to really reduce the number of animals and perhaps replace the animals in the drug development process, as well as be able to provide efficient and very personalized treatment options to patients who are in need of that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Clara. I'm a product manager at Clover Health, which Luisa has very eloquently explained earlier. So currently I'm working on provider engagement, which is basically our provider-facing products focused on delivering the best data to our providers, support them in their care of our members. And in particular, I wanted to tell a little bit why I joined Clover in particular. So for me, healthcare is so important because health enables us to be able to do the things that we love to do most. So often we talk about it in terms of like science and policy, et cetera. But at the end of the day, when we talk to our members, ultimately all they want to do is be able to spend time with their grandkids, to go to church, to cook, et cetera. And obviously, health is a huge enabler of those things. And we want to be able to allow them to continue to do those things for as long as possible. So that's definitely been the reason why I was interested in healthcare, and Clover, in my opinion, is really well positioned to, and the incentives are really well aligned to help us do that for everyone in the US.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I also work at Clover Health, and I'm also on the product team. Sorry. And I first got into healthcare right after college when I went to Nairobi and did an internship before going on to my job that I had done and gotten. But I took 3 months off and went and worked at this maternal healthcare startup that was trying to bring affordable and high quality healthcare to the women in Nairobi, and still are, and set up their IT and prototype some apps for them, and just really loved the experience of working with a bunch of really passionate people about what they were doing. And it was definitely one of the least structured, most chaotic environments I've ever worked in, but also one of the most rewarding and meaningful. And no one ever told me you have to work late or you have to work on the weekends, but it was one of those experiences where I felt like the harder I worked, the more I got out of it. So your talk really spoke to me as well. And it was just one of those things that I'll never forget. And so then I went on and I did my big tech company product job, and never quite got that itch out of my system to get back into it. And so when I learned about Clover and what they were doing, I just got so excited about getting back to a company that was really focused on improving the world around them, improving the lives of their customers, and as Clara alluded to, had the incentive to improve their members' lives as in addition to making profits. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So everybody here, very mission driven, super passionate about the spaces that you're in. It's so great to hear from people who are excited to be building the products that they are building. One thing I want to mention is just a plug for Slido. So if you do have questions during this, we're going to take Q&A at the end. But if you want to go on your phones to sli.do and just enter Women PM, you can go ahead and ask questions and they'll show up on my nifty little iPad here. So I'll incorporate those as they come. Okay, so we're all working in healthcare. What do you think it takes to build great products for healthcare? And anybody who wants to kind of start. Sure.
So first thing is practice empathy. So at the Ends for Healing, our fundamental guiding principle is the empathy, understanding of who are you designing your product for, what kind of challenges they're facing, what's their journey, what kind of problem they're trying to solve. In BJ Fogg's model, trying to create human motivation is probably the most difficult thing. So you don't want to focus there. You don't want to put your own motivation into them. What you wanted to do is you study what's their motivation and you educate them by doing these behavior changes. They can live longer to see their kids growing up, or they can, go travel more often with their husbands. Oftentimes, the patient might not see that, but they have their motivation that gets them excited. So the empathy is the first step.
That's a great point. That I think in so many of the apps that we deal with here that are built in Silicon Valley, people are building products for themselves, and a lot of times in healthcare, you are not the end user. So yeah, putting yourself in the position of and thinking about what is the motivations that's driving the end user is super critical. Joe?
In addition to what Amy mentioned, I think for me, more of being a scientist at heart, it's really solving fundamental problems, more of high risk, high reward projects, and the companies that were mentioned, which they really came from those high risk, high reward types of ideas, which take time, but have immense amount of returns. But of course, we have to keep our customers in mind to make sure we're still solving the biggest problems in connection to getting feedback from our customers and being able to provide what we are really building and how we are really solving. For my company instance, it's in terms of how we are really solving the animal inaccuracy problem by building a product that really reflects what we really see as a challenge or obstacle in animal testing in the clinical trial design. And the second is more like human representation in clinical trials. And these are the problems that, as Amy mentioned, is something we have to understand. And for me, to solve those fundamental problems, I think will lead to creating really big and great healthcare products.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll answer. I think, that one thing that I've come to appreciate over the past couple of years working at Clover is that healthcare is incredibly complex, and it's I look at everything as like a systems designs problem, and it's like the most exciting systems design problem I've ever seen. But I think that before you go to change the system or change the status quo, and it's definitely a place where you should challenge the status quo, it's really important to understand why it is the way it is. How did you get to where you are? Why is the system like this? What's in place to protect people versus bureaucracy? Because it can often be really difficult to tell.
Yeah, great point. And I think that's a really key point, especially for people in the Bay Area to remember, is that there are a lot of smart people in healthcare, even at traditional healthcare companies, and they have made decisions and moved in their direction for a reason. So it's always good to really understand and learn about that before kind of jumping to conclusions. Claire, anything to add?
Yeah, just to that point, I think it's really easy. Again, I think actually unlocking and understanding why those policies were created the way they were or why people made decisions will actually really get to Amy's original point, which is you can start to understand the problems in the healthcare system. In particular with us, a lot of our patients require longitudinal care. They're pretty sick. They have chronic conditions, and it's not something that necessarily I always have can understand for myself. And so when you look at these policies, you start to kind of unlock the voices that were sort of behind that policy becoming into existence and learn something about the customer that you might not know before. And it gives you a great way to dig and figure out, okay, what are the real problems that people are facing today, and how can we fix them?
So speaking of real problems that you're facing, what are some challenges that you've overcome or you've faced or you're currently facing with the products that you're building?
I think for our company, since DNS is part of integrated medicine, and in the US, integrated medicine wasn't even, practiced in every single medical facilities. And so there's a lot of justification, and I realize education is actually a huge part of what we do. Like if I ask this room, how many people like music? Raise your hand. See, there's a lot, right? And how many people like dance? All right, well, we got a good crowd here. And so, did you know dancing reduces dementia by 76%?
Wow.
Anybody? Just one. She's on my team, so she knows. So, reduce cardiovascular death by 46%. Anybody? No? Okay. And then for cancer patients like myself, increase quality of life by 50% and reduce pain by 59%. And prevention of falling, improve balance by 50%. And falling is a huge problem in elder care. For those of us in healthcare, when an elders fall, the year after, about 50% die. So, yeah. And so what we do is we end up realizing there's a lot of public education that we have to do. I'm actually finally decided to turn my last 5-year creative writing into a book. It's called stage4.org, stageiv.org. And we're also launching a web magazine to serving as a educational components. So hopefully by raise that awareness and then by working with institute who's more open-minded, and perhaps like you guys who focus more on holistic health rather than just drugs, and I'm grateful now there's more and more research come out, and hopefully together we can help us spread the word, and together we can change this climate. But yeah, certainly there's a huge part of education involved for what we do.
Thank you. For my company, the biggest obstacles that I'm trying to solve, or I have experienced being in the research and the clinician side, is serious knowledge silos. Like clinicians have an immense amount of knowledge, which is barely communicated to the research side, and vice versa. The other, I think, is the less penetration of the tech. Which means that, on the outside, for example, Google understands analytics, computational aspects of various different products or various different data sets that perhaps has not been transferred inside in the research world. And it can be for many reasons. For example, life sciences is complex, chaotic, and you have to do a lot of real time experiments that, a data set, to generate a data set, which is doesn't happen, if you're in Google or Facebook. And the third, I think, is the partial information of different data, healthcare information that is disorganized, and there is really no place for organization or understanding, like how a complete health data set, even for one particular patient, really looks like. And those are the things, I think, as a company, I see our obstacles, and how we are really solving it is by asking the customers to provide the data so that they get a better software in return, which all our customers, they are really big South San Francisco pharma companies, have agreed upon and understand the purpose of that, which is great, as well as being able to in-house generate the data and not being able to wait to create the data, because as you're aware, for AI-based analytics, we need lots and lots of data sets. So this is how we solve these problems.
Yeah, good. Really quick poll of the audience. How many of you work in healthcare or have worked in healthcare? Awesome. Okay. All right. So messy data, I think everybody's familiar with. Cool. Any obstacles, Claire or Alicia, you want to touch on and how you're overcoming them?
Yeah, I'd say I completely agree with the messy data, low tech environment. I think that's been something that's been challenging for us. We've done some things. I'm seeing like someone in the audience who had to work on this, where we've automated faxing and mailing, and like things that you just don't think about as like high tech solutions have become like a really, really core part of all of our products. I think something I didn't expect and have learned is that the way our members want to engage with us is often also low tech, given the population we're working with. And I think it'll change over time. But I think, when you design a product for yourself, which I've done in the past, you just say like, oh, how would I want to do this? And again, I think it's going back to that empathy, really thinking about like, where is this provider meeting me at? Where is this member meeting me at? And being really open-minded to those more physical solutions.
Yeah, I would just add 100% in agreement with everything that's been said. And I think part of when we talk about low tech, I think one of the challenges is also like, even in areas where there's a lot of technology, the system is very, very fragmented. There are a lot of players, and also policy drives a lot of the innovation and things that people come out with to this day. So you're kind of competing in this environment where there's a lot of different policies that have driven sort of this different amount of fragmentation in the market, which means that, like, going back to the messy data, your data kind of sits within a lot of siloed systems, and the idea of having to pull those together is really hard. Even to think about, like, I always use the example of when I work with providers, one of the things I remember is providers are also like not always business people. They don't always have an expertise, but they're trying to run an independent practice. And so also I think that's been something that's been like challenging as we've thought about our provider network and how to get them engaged, is just like each of them are sort of working in their own system and trying to make the business work, and don't always have the data infrastructure to support that you might be able to achieve here.
Great, thanks. So question from the audience. How do you handle exec direction or prioritization that goes against what actually benefits the end customer, but is necessary evil for sales or other things?
I think we just heard this wonderful talk. And, for me, I was very excited to learn all these purpose-driven company and that become the highest revenue-driven companies, right? And we need more this kind of inspiring talks. I think you should help the patients first, then revenue will come in. If you constantly doing shortcuts for revenue, focused approach, one day it's going to come back and bite you. And I'm pretty certain about that.
So reminding your executives why you're here.
No, I completely agree with Amy. Customers come first to me. Even if I have to sell a platform for free, I would do it because the feedback that I receive from these amazing experienced customers who are also policymakers, it's a great platform to hear what they really have as fears or concerns, or the excitement that you may not get if you're just selling it and asking for money. And one of the best examples, which I think of and that comes to, is the freemium project by Google. And now they're no one can compete with them for the same reasons. And definitely, patients always should come first and should drive the way the company should be built.
Yeah, 100% agreement with everything that's been said. And I just also add that I think like one of the things that's I think really important to set up front is just having, and I think you can push executives, I think it can come from anywhere, but pushing values from the very top and having executives sort of establish cultural values or what's important. So obviously there's like member first and an establishment of like use your empathy, etc. And so that when these things sort of get surfaced and ultimately you have to make trade-off decisions, you're making them from a place of like values and principles that are shared across an organization. So often it's hard to think about this when you're first starting a company, but certainly I think at least what we've seen at Clover is a lot of those values sort of come from a grassroots place, and you can always push people to be establishing those. But I think just having shared language and shared values across the organization about what's important is so important in these conversations, especially when you're making these kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I would just say I think there's a lot in this question, but I do think that it can often feel like executives are pushing you in one direction that's misaligned with your member. I know for us, what I've seen is that because our business model is aligned with what's good for our members, that those trade-offs really, I think, might be somewhat artificial. Like if our business needs something to help our members, like it may look like a really, really cool product that we're releasing that goes direct to the member, or it may look like something that's like a compliance file, right? And it doesn't mean that we're not doing what's best for our members. So I think, I would encourage you to think about like, where is this request coming from? Why would this executive ask for this thing? And is it really in line with what's good for the business and what's good for our customers?
Great, thank you. We have another question from the audience that kind of overlaps with something I was going to mention. So can you tell me about an approach you took in solving a difficult problem when developing your product, and how did it help? Any frameworks for, for kind of coming up against challenging, maybe something that you haven't come across before and you're figuring out how to approach it for the first time? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm laughing. The first thing I did at Clover was work on provider data, and I'm working on provider data again. It's like the problem that never ends.
3 years later?
It just doesn't go away. And I think, for me, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, this is a very simple like data management website problem. And it was like totally off base. And I think the thing that I come back to every time I run up against problems like this is going back and really understanding the root cause of the problem. I think often you can see like symptoms of a problem, and then when you dig a little bit deeper and say like, why is that happening? Why is that happening? We have a PM who loves to ask like the 5 whys, keep pushing to the bottom of like, what's really driving this thing to happen? Because often the thing you see is not actually like the root cause. And so that's something I would say to do.
Cool. Anyone else?
I think we are building a very complex product. What we really want to build is a virtual physiological human and animal model. So it's definitely not easy and a very complicated product to explain or sell by itself. So it took me 2 years personally to really incorporate the company. For one big reason is I wanted to know top down and bottoms up where the problems and loopholes are in the systems, and what would it take to build a virtual human being. Not because it sounds very fancy, it's because I think we need it, because we are at a place where we scientifically know a lot about diseases, we know a lot about drugs, but we have no way to really scale it. And then the only way the framework worked for me is to go and learn it myself and create a team of supporters, advisors, and motivators around me, and ask lots and lots of questions. So if anyone is thinking about creating a complicated product, just find the experts or friends from in the similar fields and ask them, what would it take? What do I need to learn? Where would I go from point A to point B? And what would be my first product for a mission that might take a couple of years to establish? And this is why it takes time.
I think for us, the biggest challenge is we won about 15 awards, and because our solution is so unique, a lot of these awards that we won actually won in different hackathons. And so the challenge is we end up have codes created by different developers. And so I would say if you're building a product, trying to make sure there's all documentations in the codes, so it's easier to transfer, from one person to the other. And you might encounter quite a bit of that, like, at the early stage when you're building your companies.
Okay, because there's a question specifically for you, Clara, so you don't get out of this. Question for Clara. How does your work at Clover compare to your previous job in social good at Facebook?
Oh, great question. I don't know if this is working. Yeah, it's interesting because I was working in a very different space during social good. So I was working primarily in like nonprofit fundraising in particular, which I think is almost the exact, in some ways, opposite to the incentive model that we've seen at Clover. So one of the challenges in nonprofit fundraising is basically you have basically this tension between looking to spend your time raising money and basically selling people on this vision, and then also the execution part of making that happen. And nonprofits struggle a lot to get the audience to be able to tell the story, and they spend so much of their time just trying to fund the thing that they have often struggle with just being able to raise money. So it's pretty interesting because I think Clover actually in many ways represents that unique alignment, which is if our members are healthier, we save money, they save money. And in the long term, it's better for everyone. And so I would say that for me, Clover is unique in the ability, the like incentive alignment that exists here. In many ways, I will say like the easier part about Facebook is I think the incentives are very much in place in terms of like the two-sided market. Like nonprofits really need Facebook. They are really reliant on it, and obviously users are on it. So a lot of that, the engagement challenges we're facing on Clover's side with just getting like providers to like pay attention to the things we're doing is pretty different. For example, like Facebook is pretty centralized, and as I mentioned earlier, healthcare tends to be pretty fragmented. So definitely different types of problems, and I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways was also like the importance of that incentive alignment.
So building on that, do you think that building products with empathy and with social vision can sometimes conflict with being a profitable company?
Yes.
Can building products with empathy and a social vision, can those conflict with being a profitable company? How do you think about making your business viable when you're also trying to do social good?
I think it's definitely a lot of learning experience for myself. Especially, so one of the challenges that you were asking earlier is like a lot of healthcare professionals, they work in this field for 30 years and they're about the age about to retire. And a lot of them are like, have background in, nursing or what other type of medical training, but they have very little technology knowledge. And so adoption to innovation is naturally slow, right? And so what we realize is partnership is actually really important, for companies like us, like instead of trying to knock at the door to every single clinics, ourselves, we can partner with other people already to provide service in this field. Yeah. And then other things, we actually talked to Mani about this year. We're going to open up our platform to individual users instead of, waiting for this long cycle of B2B sales. We're not giving up them, of course. We still, continue that long conversation, long, with all many circles. And then, since we already have the platform, and then, we actually, a lot of times when I'm speaking, people will come up to me like, hey, my grandma can really benefit from this. How do I sign up? And so, and then, like we were one of the top 5 finalists for Pfizer's challenge. And literally they have different mentors. One is also stage 4 cancer survivor. And, she was like, well, I want to use it now, but I don't want to wait for my hospital to take forever to adopt this. So how can I access it? And so this year, we decided that we're going to open up the program to individual users with a very unique model like Tom Shoes. So one healthy user join the platform, they can sponsor a patient. So this could be a patient they know, their family and friends, could be their dad, could be their mom, could be their sisters, anyone who struggle with chronic conditions, could be an aging adult, could be a foster child, right? And so because our platform is so unique, we have this buddy matching system. They can not only be a financial sponsor, they can also be the exercise buddy. And I'm pretty excited about this, and so I can report back how that goes in terms of financial
Great.
benefits.
So like the ideal model, I mean, the original model for you is B2B sales, which can be slow, especially in healthcare. And now you're finding opportunities where you might do partnerships or just open up directly to individuals. So that's great. What have you found, Joe?
Great. So I will give my own aunt's example here and why Verisim exists right now. So my aunt has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and the doctors were only giving her 2 to 5 minutes and giving her standard of care. And at one point I kind of intervened and said, hey, what if we could tell you what specific drug combination would really work in her physiological conditions that she has? Would you be willing to try it out if it's not outside the whole regimen? And he agreed. We tested, because the first time the chemo didn't work. The second time, this is very personal example, and it not only worked, it also gave the trust to the clinician that, wow, this type of technology, which is, you are able to quickly determine what types of drug or combination of drugs would work in a patient with very specific needs, can help got the trust built really quickly. And for me, that is a very standing example. Like, for empathy is, patients first, and also for on the other side of the clinicians or the pharma company, they think about businesses like, how can I quickly come to an understanding and increase the number of drugs that needs to go into the market, or for clinicians that I don't have enough time, but I want to be able to help this patient. So it's really comes down for me, it's building the trust and making them see that, okay, this is how this platform is going to work. This is the amount of information we can provide you, and not overselling it. And that really creates sort of like your own moat, because they believe in what you say from now on. And healthcare has been known for having a really long-term relationships with their partners. So they don't want to switch, like many of the tech companies. So once they start seeing and building a relationship where they see this company is really building something purposeful and meaningful, and also doing what it says,
Right.
is really going to be profitable and nothing else.
Yeah. So the switching costs are high in healthcare, and so being able to show them in a lightweight way that like you have value here and they can see it instantaneously. Great.
Yeah. So just to repeat the question, it seems like the question is sort of, how do you think about maybe trading off, or is it possible to exist that a company has a social impact mission, and how can that conflict with profitability? So definitely something we would talk about at Facebook in particular, which is ultimately the mission of the company is like sort of connecting people, and they make money off of advertising, and ultimately like social good in some ways is prioritized against those set of goals that are competing against like how much you invest in Instagram, how much you invest in all these other consumer products that maybe have a more direct line to ads. And so I would say like two things. One, it's much easier when you're, again, just to repeat those again, when your incentives are really aligned and when the business model works in a way that as you do more socially impactful work, your profits also increase. However, that is not the case overall. But I will say, even at Facebook, I think there is a understanding that over the long term, like the thing that is hardest to buy is like customer loyalty and a belief in your brand and your company's brand to do good. And in many ways, like being able to show the customer that you like will put them first and will advocate for their position gives you a lot more power later on to be able to really help them, and is a huge keystone to brands, just to go back to the keynote speech. So I think it's possible, but I'm definitely
Cool. So building on that question, so yes, we have ideas on how we can be a viable product, but how do you actually get funding and think about like gaining access to VCs, and like what kind of VCs invest in healthcare startups? How do you sell to VCs when it's such a messy industry?
I'm very interesting talking to your organization, and I'm very grateful there's a company like you who's funding social impact, companies. I myself had a personal goal. I'm gonna start a patient entrepreneur fund in the future. I don't know when yet, but I think patients like myself who turn into an entrepreneur have the deepest passion that you can possibly replace. But of course, we need help. I learned a lot through this whole process. In terms of funding, I think it gets a little complicated. I personally definitely have quite a lot of hesitance to bring in VC monies. There's foundation money, there's social impact funding, which is still operate like a VC. There's grants that you can look into. And the best way is if you can bring in revenue, that would be like really
Some of the money.
Yeah, exactly. Being self-sustainable. And this is also a huge part of the reason that we structure our company as a social impact company instead of a nonprofit. Because I myself was on the board of international nonprofit for the last 8 years. And I've seen how difficult it is to grow as a nonprofit structure. And try to build AI and technology. You can't pay anybody in Silicon Valley, with a nonprofit structure, right? Because it's expensive. And I also love the fact that it gives us opportunity to create revenue models. And then, I love to talk to you more because, I feel very inspired by purpose-driven companies actually do end up become, high revenue, companies as well. And other than that, it's just like find smart business people and salespeople.
Well, I have taken a lot of VC money, so I definitely, one of the things that I think with the quotient itself, in my own experience with having a round close in less than 2 months for a very complicated company, I've learned one thing. Asking money from VCs is, I think, the worst thing you can do to VCs, because VCs are not here to just provide money. And to me, it's more about providing the experience and the expertise that they bring on the table. So if you go, and that's my personal opinion, if I have gone and asked every VC like, hey, I need the money because I want to build this, because I care about it, I think I would have been turned down all the time. In fact, I said, and I still believe, I don't need money. I will still continue to build this, but if having your support will really enhance and make my process go much more faster, and then helping them understand the passion and purpose, because whatever, especially for healthcare, whatever we are building is going to impact socially than any other product which is like tech-based or just app-based companies. So I think VCs really get that. So it really comes down to how passionate and purposeful this founder is and then you don't even have to ask for money, because they would want to be a part of this company because they see the bigger, better good that's going to come out of this whole trying to build something together. Really makes a big change in the game for building a really efficient healthcare product. And that's my experience so far.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. Okay, let me, yeah.
Anyone heard about SOCAP? Yeah, so the several of you. So I was a SOCAP scholarship recipient in 2015. So it's one of the largest social impact investment, social capital, one of the largest companies worldwide. And so if you are, and they just not just supporting healthcare entrepreneur, it's all dimension of social impact. So if you are in that space, definitely apply to be one of the scholarship recipients.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so let's get back to the healthcare industry. In general, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that are in the current ecosystem and that we need to kind of overcome to propel the whole industry forward?
Can I say Trump?
Anyway,
can I say Trump? Obviously, I mean, especially for you guys, right? Medicare companies, now it is, I mean, tonight is supposed to be the union, State of Union speech,
Right. It's true.
Yeah, I feel like US is the only Western company actually don't have the single payer system, right? And then today, you guys heard about the news that Amazon and JP Morgan Chase is trying to create
Sure
their own.
Hathaway, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what that gonna.
Has everybody heard about that? Yay! Yeah. So yeah, more like bigger players entering the space. It seems like everybody realizes this is an issue. Definitely some political leadership challenges there. Any other thoughts?
I think it comes down to a previous question for me that you asked about the obstacles, and it's still the same problem that I see. It's very slow pace, but the reason why it's slow pace is there's a lot of I don't know how to put it in the nicer way, ego, in terms of they're experts in this field, fantastic, very smart people, but that also creates sort of the silo problem that really blinds to really go and knock on the neighbor's expertise and understand how can we work together, like actually work together to build a scalable product. And that is something, it sound like we read about it in papers, we want to publish papers, but when it comes to the real life, it's still sort of lacking. And I think until and unless that's solved, and people are more willing to share their expertise and being able to share how to really break down the silo problems to really care about the patients, I think we'll make big progress.
So it's a great point. In startups and technology, there's such a big culture towards pushing towards open source and like sharing knowledge, having meetups like this where we talk about challenges and like building a community. That's why I love that this is like focused on healthcare, because we're trying to do that here. But yeah, in so much of healthcare, it is kind of like a walled off, kind of older culture mentality.
I was going to say, just add an additional perspective here. For me, I think I believe one of the challenges here is pricing and the way we've priced the healthcare system. So today, obviously, we pay fee for service. So doctors get paid per procedure, et cetera. And we're slowly shifting towards like more value-based care models and doctors taking on more risk and owning sort of those end outcomes. And I think in many ways, the fragmentation of that system results in the incentive structures of the pricing model as it exists today. So obviously our system is super expensive. Healthcare is really expensive in America. As a result, access to care is lower. Insurance plans have to or control this pricing in many ways with doctors. And there isn't an incentive to have systems sort of speak to each other and have this coordinated care system because no individual is sort of accountable for that end outcome. So I see one of the biggest challenges, and I am really happy to see that policy is starting to shift that a little bit, is being able to change this fee-for-service model into more of a value-based care model where individuals and doctors sort of own those outcomes and those health outcomes at the end and are being paid based off of their ability to help the member versus how many procedures are getting done.
Great. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I think if it was just one thing, it would have been easy to fix, but it's a complex system and there's many challenges. One of them that I'll add is I think the data ownership is an interesting thing in healthcare where, I go to a doctor and I don't own that data, which I find crazy and unique and different than anything else that I would do. Well, Facebook, I guess I don't own the data either, but I know that. And it's not quite so personal. Well, anyway, I think, but it comes back to, it's
free.
I pay a lot for my healthcare. And I think that coming back to that fragmentation is really important. Is this, I think that the vendors or the systems that own that data have absolutely no incentive to make it easy to get it out of and actually have an incentive to keep it in there to make it difficult for you to leave them. And so what you see is it's really, really difficult to get all that data in one place, even if you want to. And it's really difficult to build that care management unless you have it. And so that's something I think we've seen and we've been working to overcome, but has been a big challenge. And I'll say the other is that culturally, we have, I think, different expectations as consumers on healthcare. We optimize for choice over choice of the individual and choice of going to whatever doctor you want over like reducing cost or like equality. And so I think, that may not be something we ever fix, but it is like a thing that I think has made our system evolve the way that it is today. And that is the preferences of the consumers we have in this country.
Great. We're gonna keep doing some questions here for like 15 more minutes, then we'll open it up to anybody in the room. But just a reminder, if you want to go to slido, slia.do, and Women PM is the code. Okay, so people who want to get in, product managers, how important is it that you actually have healthcare experience going into this industry?
I would say it took a while to ramp up, but I don't think it's necessary. I think humility is necessary. Being willing to learn, curiosity, and just being excited about learning new spaces, and knowing that you probably will never know everything. So it's always good to ask.
Yeah. Second, Alicia, I think one thing I would add to that is actually this question actually reminds me a lot of the question that product managers often get asked, which is how important is it to be technical? And I think the answer is pretty much the same, which is it always helps a lot. And I think for two reasons. One, I think you have a deeper understanding of the space off the bat, so you can kind of like think about debugging these problems the same way you might think about like technical problems, and you just have so much more context. I think too, because we're working in healthcare, you're ultimately going to be working with healthcare people, whether it be vendors or within your own company, probably both. And I think it gives you that much more credibility to have that context and to make sort of that feel like more of a thought partnership from the beginning versus more one-sided where the healthcare person has to like explain everything. So I think from a credibility perspective, it could be really useful. That being said, I did not come in with healthcare experience. So clearly it's not absolutely necessary.
If I have to choose between a motivator, flexible, passionate person versus a very technical person, I will always choose the motivated person for one reason. This person would be willing to do anything and everything to learn and understand and really grasp on what healthcare really means. And I agree with both of them about having some experience really helps, but not necessary, because, you learn, especially as a startup of mine, you learn as you go, and there's so much to learn. Like, you can't stop learning, and it's still, you'll never be perfect or expert, and no one really expects that from a PM or even from anyone else. So that really.
I think my background is in human-centered design, and I work with so many product managers. If they have the fundamental training of human-centered design, I think it will make the whole process of building product a lot easier for them. We currently in the Open Ideal Challenge this week. We're supposed to find out if we make it to the finalists. We currently in top 40 for the caregiving for dementia. And if you have a chance to participate in any of these challenges, they literally give you all the, like a sheet of like a very detailed instructions of how do you interview users, how do you create a journey maps, and some of these things are easy to learn, due to Open Ideal. There are open educational platform, a nonprofit component of Ideal. Stanford D School is also a great resources. They actually have a lot of these type of design thinking, like sheets you can even download, kind of figuring out the basic process. I think the class is only open to Stanford students, unfortunately, but there's a lot of resources out there. If you having that, sort of fundamental knowledge, it would make it a lot easier for you to work with your design team and for you to taking that sort of empathy approach in.
So once you are a PM at a healthcare company, let's talk more about the design thinking and digging into user research. How do you? This comes from the audience too. How do you talk to somebody about? Can you talk about tools that you use for user research? For example, like how do you talk to doctors who are usually very busy and patients who might not want to share information? You have some examples you could share on how you approach that?
Yeah. Okay, so we were part of the Stanford Startup Garage, and we were required to conduct 100 interviews in a quarter. So when you have that kind of requirement, you literally run out and call all the centers, and anything you can get, just like, in some ways, is the more you reach out to people, the more you talk to users, the better you understand. Are you building the right product? Am I actually solving a problem? Is this just in my head, or this is something they actually want?
Are people pretty receptive when you've reached out to them, or is there?
You're gonna run into a mix. I actually teach, design thinking, and so one of the things before you actually talk to those people, and there's the idea settings that I use able to run a lot in like actual design agencies. There's the more to sort of run to the Starbucks and try to talk to someone type of thing. So in an idea situation, there's a sort of triangle thing you wanted to recruit for people to interview. So one is socioeconomic status. So because that will define your pricing model, right? And one is the demographic data. So ideally, you wanted to at least talk to my recommendation, at least 12 users. And in a demographic data recruitment, you wanted to including all different dimensions of the demographic that within your target audience, different age groups, the different genders, different ethnicities. And then the third part is the technology adaptability, right? So, because that defines how complicated your system should be. Because, some people could be very technology savvy. Some people can, be very, scared to using, computers, right? And so you kind of wanted to find people who's had variations in all these 3 dimensions to interview, and that will make you gather the best insights possible.
Well, that's a great approach for like targeting like a good diverse mix and making sure that you have a representative sample. Clara?
Yeah, some thoughts here.
Yeah.
So I
worked a lot with providers.
Yeah, I worked a lot with providers. I think there are one of 2 things that you can do. So the first one, which might sound super obvious, but I think is worth keeping in mind, is to embed sort of that quantitative and qualitative feedback into your products. So I think a good consumer app example of this is like Uber makes it really, really easy to like rate your drivers at the end of every experience. And so as much as you can embed some of that quantitative feedback and set metrics up front and determine like what are you trying to aim for, and what is the definition of success for you, you can build sort of that feedback cycle into the product itself, which doesn't require as much reaching out, etc. And I think something that's been effective for the user research component of it when we have wanted to go out is, in particular, I think we're well positioned in the market because we're an insurance fund, so it's very easy for us to go to providers and say like, hey, we're thinking about building like this product for you, and really making sure they understand what is the value prop that they will get out of the end of this. I think has been really helpful for us. And in that process, one of the things that we've done that I think has been really effective is something called co-design, which is basically like you get a sheet of paper, they get a sheet of paper, and you just work on like designs and products. You're like, here's the problem I think that you're looking to solve. Like, let's work through this together. And often you don't come up with the best like mocks or wireframes or designs, but you come up with a collaborative process where both of you are sort of like jumping off ideas of each other, and you can really get to the heart of their problems and by seeing sort of the solutions that they create. And we found that to be really effective with doctors who are just really excited to be involved, and especially in a space that's like often a lot of these like independent PCPs are really like neglected in some ways, and a lot of the big insurance players don't care that much about them. And so I feel like doctors have really taken to that as well.
On the member side, we've tried, for us, that's been a place where it has been a bit more sensitive. We've tried to be really careful about how we reach out to our membership, when, who, and being really sensitive to the kind of questions we're asking them. So one new tool we've just rolled out is user personas, to have these member personas that we can use as that first step. I don't think it ever really replaces true user research and validation, but it at least lets us start answering those initial questions of like, who am I building this for? Playing them through that persona and saying like, does this product even make sense for the users that we have? And like, how would I adapt it to them? And I think that's made it not so that we don't have to reach out to our members, because I still completely agree. There's no substitute for that, but at least answering a lot of those initial questions first, so it's less invasive.
One of the things I wanted to add is, has any of you here creating a journey maps before? Okay, good. Oh, yeah, we have a good crowd here. So a journey map is incredibly powerful to understand, the pathway, what users go through at different journeys, what kind of challenges they're facing, what's in their head, like what are they worried about, right? Where they wanted to go. And then if you do a very, very good journey map studies, you can really hone into when you're doing your product design, like are you actually, where are you fit in that pathway of a journey map? There's also a huge part, like when I teach design thinking, is task-oriented design, which means like if you go do your journey map and you understand this is the task you need to do, this is the next task you need to do. I mean, in this case, is the user need to do. So like say, for example, the user in the next screen need to send out an email. You might want it to put an email button in the screen. The next pass is the user need to call somebody. You might want it to put a call button there. Always think about throughout the whole design process, like there's the persona created, and the persona in itself is also very interesting. There's sort of this marketing people created the persona. There's also the user experience people created the persona. And there's other type which I myself like the most, which is the behavior persona, right? It's not only covering your demographic profiles, but as well as like exactly what kind of behavior is happening, what's their motivations. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So just before we wrap up, who's hiring for PMs, and what does your ideal product manager look like for a purpose-driven company? Kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I'll spoil it. Clover's hiring. Yeah, sure. Okay, I'll ask myself this question. Clover's hiring. We're looking for, mission-driven, really, a lot of the things everybody said, curious people that want to dive in, want to make a difference. The stuff we're building here at Clover right now is this year it's going to be a lot of internal builds, so people who really like getting into the nitty-gritty of like how an insurance operation functions and all of the compliance and regulatory details that surround that, and thinking, people who are detail oriented, cross their T's, dot their I's, love reading regs and that sort of thing. Definitely top of mind right now. Anything to add?
I'd say I think we have a small team. We have eight right now. And so I think what's been fun is that I think we're still at the point where we're building a lot of things from scratch. Like we're not sure what our full product portfolio is going to be, but we know we're not there yet. And we're a pretty, we have a pretty diverse group of people, and we have a pretty diverse set of products. And I think one thing that's been fun for me is that there's never any day that looks the same. And I've been here about 2.5 years, and I've worked on at least like 10 different products, and it's been really fun to have lots of different challenges. And so I think somebody who, really is excited about facing big problems every day and ambiguity and diving right in and learning a lot is like the type of person that we want to add to our team.
Yep. Thanks. Joe or Amy, are you hiring?
I will be hiring in 6 months, but I agree with all the profile you mentioned. Also to add on motivator. I think I'm a PM right now in my own company because I'm trying to balance the software side, the simulation side, the R&D, and the business side, and I'm also trying to motivate people because they all come from different disciplines and they're experts in their own disciplines, but really understanding the other side and not feeling like, oh, I'm the one doing more work and not the other person, those kind of conversations. So someone who really believes that everyone in a company or is building absolutely essential aspect of the company and really feels it in their core and really motivates people, and not forget the vision, because that can be lost when you're building multiple products or just doing experimentation with multiple products, and that would be godsend. So yeah.
So we actually looking for technology people and sales people, like, business development people. That's our priority this year is funding and sales. What we're looking for, first one is passion, bottom line, passion. You have to love what we do. And my personal approach is also, I want to support what you wanted to go to in your life. And how can we create a possibility for your growth as well as for my company together, the beautiful future we create together. Those are important for us.
Great, thank you. And with that, any questions for the audience? Feel free to come up to, I know you've been asking questions, I really appreciate it, but if you want to ask anything else, could you grab a mic?
You hear me? Okay. I have two quick questions. For Clover Health, I know recently I know recently there's kind of a chief behavioral officer who joined. He's in New York City, I guess. He actually comes from Microsoft. And I'm just curious, how does him or his team actually works with product managers or product designers? Second question is for everybody here is if are there any other healthcare startups or healthcare companies that you personally really admire, and what problems are they solving?
I can answer the first one, then I'll let everyone else have a chance. So Matt Wallert is, I think, who you're referring to, our chief behavioral officer. And he is actually here this week. I just talked to him today. And
he had a conflicting meetup talk in the South Bay. He really wanted to be here.
It's pretty popular these days. Yeah, he doesn't have a team. It's just him right now, which I think has been awesome, because the way he's really worked has been connecting PMs to different resources, different ways of thinking, and then also partnering with them on products. So we, as an insurance company, we do a health risk assessment every year. He was a really big part in that and helping design, how do we ask these questions? What are we really trying to get to so that we can build products down the road that build in behavioral health change? So I think, how I've seen it go so far is using him as an amazing resource and having him be one of those people who partners with you as you're thinking through a product, and then also being one of the people who taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, I have this amazing thing for you. And you're like, well, that's great. Thank you. And I think his experience at Microsoft has been really valuable because he just knows a lot about the industry, knows a lot of the right people to talk to, and has been able to connect us pretty quickly. Your second question. I really love Zoom Care. I don't know. I've always had a thing for them since I lived in Seattle. And I had a friend who used them in Portland. Zoom Care is they're pretty interesting. They started as an ER where they told you fixed prices. If you have a broken arm, it's going to be $300. And that is unheard of in healthcare, knowing your price up front and having it be something you can afford. So that was really cool. And then they got into insuring other insurance and started offering employer-based plans where they had local primary care clinics, very similar to IORA, but it was really for employers, and started focusing really on healthy lifestyles. And so they've done a lot of interesting things in lower levels of care. So not reinventing specialist visits and not reinventing the hospital system, but really providing that high quality, lower level of care in a way that kind of meets consumers where they are, what they need.
I'll answer the second question. I really admire Forward. It's a company started by ex-Googlers who had a vision that I don't own my own data, and how quickly can I assess how my health is progressing. And what they did is create a virtual clinic, but more you walk in and it's all automated. Sort of like having a smartphone, but more realistic and more detailed analytics. And also with more medical expertise in the background, where if you need a doctor, there would be a doctor present for you. I think it's a great concept because they're collecting data from ground up rather than just having one piece of the data and working with that. So I think that's a really great vision, and it's succeeding. So it's great to know that there are companies out there building something marvelous.
I think for me, I actually would recommend to look into some of the conferences that I like and, the speakers they feature. I myself, was speaking multiple times at Health 2.0, Health Technology Forum, the Stanford Medicine X conferences. There's so many companies out there. I personally value those who actually do, practice all the approach that we're talking about, the empathy, patient focus, those companies, yeah.
Or anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So I think I really like Quartet Health, and I think they're focus on an interesting aspect that's often neglected in healthcare, which is around like behavioral health and like mental health in general, and how that plagues often like the people who are also the most vulnerable in the healthcare system. So I think that's especially an important space. I think there are also like a lot of interesting things happening in the digital therapeutic space around mental health, and have been proven to be pretty effective there as well. So in general, those kinds of companies, I'm always, I think it's such an important issue in healthcare and is often forgotten in the physical like manifestations of it. Anything there I think is interesting.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, let's give it up for Amy, Joe, Clara, and Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. And if everybody wants to stick around, network, grab another drink, some food if you want, and we'll just hang out for a while. Thank you.
It always means a lot to me, especially maybe like not only breaking the ceiling, but you know, how to think like you're also going
Thank you so much. So, yeah, so